Today we're going to listen to the story of the Colosseum, told not by historians but unusually in its own words. A time drenched in glory and blood, where stone witnessed the rise and fall of empires, where cheers and screams echoed through ancient corridors as life and death hung in the balance of a Caesar's whim, where the very soul of Rome revealed itself in spectacles of both magnificent splendor and terrible cruelty. But if you think this is just another monument, you may want to hear from it directly. Its testimony spans nearly 2 millennia, from the thunderous roars of 50,000 spectators to the whispered prayers of martyrs. From imperial inaugurations bathed in the blood of exotic beasts, to the quiet centuries of abandonment when nature slowly reclaimed what man had built. Before we begin, our videos are crafted like audio biographies, made to be enjoyed even without watching the screen. Just let the words wash over you, and the gentle sound of crackling fire at the end will accompany you into sleep. Let the ancient stones speak their secrets as you drift toward slumber. From the vision of Emperor Vespasian rose the mightiest arena the world had ever known, the Flavian Amphitheater. What if the Colosseum could speak? What stories would it whisper from its ancient stones? The eternal witness, whose massive travertine walls have outlasted empires. From its inauguration in 80 CE, the Colosseum became Rome's beating heart, hosting spectacular games that lasted for days. For over 4 centuries, it stood as the empire's pride, where emperors displayed their power and citizens of all ranks gathered as one. Through republic, empire, and beyond, these stones absorbed the echoes of humanity's greatest triumphs and darkest impulses. Are you ready to bear with me as we uncover how a simple amphitheater became immortal? How stone and mortar transcended their humble origins to become a symbol that has outlasted the very empire that created it. How the Colosseum became not just a witness to history, but history itself. Then listen closely, because this is the moment the Colosseum begins to speak. I am the Colosseum, the eternal arena. My stones have witnessed the rise and fall of Rome, absorbed the roars of crowds and the whispers of prayers. For nearly 2 millennia, I have stood while empires crumbled around me. The blood spilled upon my sands, the glory celebrated within my walls, all memories etched into my very being. Time flows differently through my ancient corridors. I have seen emperors rise and fall, watched as Rome transformed from pagan glory to Christian devotion. I have absorbed the final breaths of gladiators, the desperate prayers of martyrs, the thunderous applause of 50,000 voices united in bloodlust and admiration. I speak to you now across the chasm of centuries. My voice carries the echoes of countless souls who lived and died within my embrace. I am neither hero nor villain, merely a silent witness to humanity's grandest spectacles and darkest impulses. Tonight, I shall share what only these stones remember. My memories are not merely history, they are confessions. I have harbored secrets through the ages, watched as Rome's heart beat strongest, then faltered. I have seen the glory of emperors and the courage of those condemned to die for entertainment. Every stone in my foundation holds a story waiting to be told. Feel how the very air changes as you step into my shadow. Can you sense the residual energy of countless human dramas played out within these walls? The gladiator's fear before combat, the emperor's contemplation of life and death with a mere gesture, the collective breath of thousands held in anticipation. I have witnessed humanity at its most glorious and most terrible. I have seen courage that defied death and cruelty that defined an era. Listen closely now as I share my testament, not as cold stone, but as living memory. For I am the Colosseum, and through me the past breathes still. But this is no ordinary history. This is the voice of the Colosseum itself, speaking through time, through stone, through the echoes of countless souls who lived and died within its embrace. A living witness to emperors and slaves, to gladiators who carved their legends in sand-soaked crimson. Listen now to the whispers of stone and memory. The Colosseum, that eternal arena of glory and despair, holds secrets known only to itself. For nearly 2,000 years, it has stood witness to humanity's greatest triumphs and darkest impulses, a monument carved from travertine and blood. I feel a stirring now, a rumble deep within these ancient walls. The Colosseum awakens, consciousness returning after centuries of silent observation. Its first thoughts form slowly, like dust motes drifting through shafts of light, memories crystallizing into words. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That low vibration beneath your feet? The first whisper of a voice that has waited millennia to speak. Proud yet haunted by its past, the Colosseum carries both the glory of Rome and the weight of countless souls who perished for entertainment. I am the Flavian amphitheater, though history knows me as the Colosseum. I have stood since the reign of Vespasian, my foundations deep in Roman soil. I have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, survived fire and earthquake, outlasted all who built me. Now, let me tell you my story, from the very beginning. I was born from ashes and ambition. Where once stood Nero's golden palace, I rose, stone by stone, as Emperor Vespasian's gift to Rome. The year was 72 AD, and the empire had barely survived the chaos following the tyrant's suicide. 4 emperors in a single year had left Rome bleeding. Then came Vespasian, a soldier who understood what the people needed. "Let what the tyrant stole be returned to the people," Vespasian declared as they drained the artificial lake where Nero once staged naval battles for his amusement. I felt my first stirrings of consciousness as workers laid my foundation upon that reclaimed land. The symbolism was not subtle. Where a mad emperor had built monuments to himself, I would rise as a monument to Rome. My bones were travertine limestone, my muscles tufa and concrete. As my walls began to climb toward the sky, I sensed the purpose flowing through my stones. Vespasian was clever. He understood that bread and circuses would secure his new Flavian dynasty. By building me, he erased Nero's memory while winning the people's hearts. I was to be their arena, their Flavian amphitheater. Every stone placed was a statement of power. Vespasian had risen from humble origins to claim the purple, and I was to be his legacy, a permanent reminder that the Flavian dynasty had saved Rome from Nero's madness. The people cheered as my walls grew higher. They did not yet know the blood that would soak my sands, but I was beginning to understand my destiny. 4 levels of arcades, 76 numbered entrants. I was designed for efficiency and grandeur alike. My stones came from quarries near Tivoli, transported by oxen over miles of Roman roads. Thousands of Jewish prisoners captured after the rebellion in Judea provided the labor, their sweat becoming part of my very essence. I rose quickly, eager to fulfill my purpose. Then, in 79 AD, as I neared completion, Vespasian fell ill. An emperor should die standing, he jested weakly as death approached. His son Titus would complete me, but I felt uncertainty ripple through my half-finished corridors. Would I fulfill my Creator's vision? As Vespasian's soul departed, I stood incomplete, a monument to ambition caught between creation and destiny, waiting for the roar of crowds to give me purpose. I am formed of stone and sacrifice. The travertine of my bones came from Tivoli, 16 miles away. Each block was quarried with precision, loaded onto ox-drawn carts that groaned under the weight. I felt myself taking shape as these massive stones, some weighing several tons, were set in place by calloused hands and ingenious machines. The volcanic tufa from nearby hills forms my inner structure, lighter, more yielding, yet strong in its own way. I am a marriage of materials, each with its purpose. My concrete core, that Roman innovation, binds me together in an unbreakable embrace. The builders mixed lime, sand, and pozzolanic ash that hardens even underwater, a recipe that would outlast empires. My design was unprecedented, a perfect oval of precise mathematics. The arches that form my facade distribute weight with elegant efficiency. Each vault and corridor calculated to channel not just stone, but humanity. My builders created a complex system of passages that would allow 50,000 spectators to enter and exit within minutes, a feat of crowd management never before attempted. I consumed materials in quantities that stagger the mind. 100,000 cubic meters of travertine alone. Thousands of workers labored to create me, many of them Jewish captives brought to Rome after Jerusalem fell. Their sweat soaked into my stones, their breath mingles with my mortar. I feel their stories embedded within me, their suffering and skill inseparable from my grandeur. As my walls rose higher, I began to understand my uniqueness. No structure of this ambition had ever been attempted. The precision of my 80 entrances, the harmony of my proportions. I was becoming something unprecedented. My builders worked with such confidence, as if they had always known I would exist, as if I were merely waiting to be revealed from the stone. I am no longer just stone from the earth. I have become something new, a creation with purpose and presence. The materials that form me have transcended their origins. The travertine that once lay in quiet darkness now stands proudly in the sun. I feel a consciousness emerging within my walls, a destiny taking shape. I am becoming the Flavian amphitheater, the greatest arena Rome will ever know. I felt the anticipation building within my stone veins as artisans applied final touches to my magnificent form. Emperor Titus himself supervised, his gaze scrutinizing every detail. The velarium, my great canvas awning, was stretched overhead, casting gentle shadows across my freshly completed seating tiers. Each section meticulously arranged according to social rank, from senators' marble benches to the wooden galleries for common citizens. Then came the day. My inauguration. My 76 numbered entrances opened simultaneously, and humanity flooded through me. 50,000 souls poured into my embrace, their voices rising in a thunderous chorus that vibrated through my foundations. For the first time, I understood my purpose. I was not merely architecture. I was a vessel for human passion, for the collective breath of Rome itself. Titus declared 100 days of games to celebrate my birth. I watched as gladiators clashed, their blood seeping into my sandy floor. Wild beasts from distant lands roared and died for Roman entertainment. Some nights they flooded my arena, transforming me into a vast lake where mock naval battles played out beneath my watching walls. I was intoxicated by spectacle. Through these games, I became Titus's instrument of legitimacy. The people adored him for the spectacles I housed. With each roar of approval, the Flavian dynasty's hold on Rome strengthened. I felt pride in my magnificence, in how my perfect acoustics carried every sound. The clash of steel, the cheers of the crowd, the final gasps of the defeated. Yet with each passing day, a troubling awareness grew within my stones. The adoration I craved came intertwined with suffering. I drank in the crowd's excitement while simultaneously absorbing the terror of those who died for entertainment. This duality would define me. Grandeur and brutality, magnificence and cruelty, all housed within my perfect elliptical form. Those inaugural 100 days set my pattern for centuries to come. I found my voice in the collective breath of Rome, in cheers and gasps, in prayers and curses. Titus gave me life, but it was the people who gave me purpose. I became more than stone and mortar. I became the beating heart of Roman entertainment, a legacy that would outlast the empire itself. Domitian's shadow fell across my foundations as he took control after Titus's death. Unlike his brother's warmth, Domitian brought cold calculation to my completion. His vision extended beneath my sandy floor, carving into my depths to create what they called the hypogeum. I felt the chisels and picks against my bedrock, a strange sensation as workers hollowed out my insides, transforming me into something far more complex than originally intended. The hypogeum became a labyrinth within me, a dark, hidden world of narrow passages and chambers. They built 2 main levels, connected by steep wooden stairs and lined with small cells. I could feel the weight of the wooden elevators they installed, ingenious machines operated by counterweights and capstans. These lifts would raise gladiators and wild beasts directly through trapdoors in my arena floor, creating spectacular surprises that made the crowds gasp with delight and terror. Domitian himself would often inspect the work, his paranoid eyes scrutinizing every detail. I sensed his cruelty in how he designed the cages, tight, confining spaces where exotic beasts from Africa and Asia would be starved to increase their ferocity. The preparation rooms for gladiators were sparse and functional. The condemned waited in dark cells, hearing the roar of the crowd above, knowing that when they ascended through my trapdoors, they were likely rising to meet their deaths. My transformation was remarkable. Above, spectators enjoyed sunlight and spectacle. Below, a different world existed, hot, dark, and filled with fear. The contrast became part of my identity. Workers installed a complex system of pulleys and counterweights that could rapidly change scenery or release dozens of animals simultaneously. The mechanisms creaked within me like new joints, painful at first, but eventually becoming extensions of my stone body. With each modification, I became more efficient at delivering death as entertainment. Domitian's obsession with gladiatorial spectacles drove him to perfect my underground systems. He would spend hours watching rehearsals of elaborate productions, mock naval battles, exotic animal hunts, and executions staged as mythological tableaux. His thin lips would curl into a rare smile when a mechanism worked perfectly, when beasts appeared to materialize from nowhere on my arena floor. I felt pride in my technological sophistication. No other amphitheater in the Empire possessed such engineering marvels. Yet I also felt the weight of what these improvements meant. My hypogeum made killing more theatrical, more efficient, more entertaining. The dark passages Domitian carved within me would forever be part of my legacy, magnificent in design, terrible in purpose. As Rome celebrated my completion, I wondered what horrors my new depths would witness in the centuries to come. 100,000 souls fill my massive embrace. From the privileged senators in their white-striped togas lounging on marble seats nearest the action, to the equestrians in their rows behind, to the common citizens above them. My stands mirror Rome itself. The hierarchy is absolute, with women and foreigners relegated to the highest tiers, where the view diminishes, but the passion does not. In my stone womb, Rome's social order is carved in living flesh. The noise. Oh, the glorious noise. A symphony of Latin, Greek, Gallic, and countless provincial tongues rises like incense to the gods. Vendors weave through the crowds selling wine, honey cakes, and souvenir figurines of famous gladiators. The scent of exotic perfumes from the wealthy mingles with the earthy sweat of laborers. Betting is furious. Fortunes change hands on the outcome of a single thrust. I know their moods, these Romans. I feel their collective breath catch when a retiarius narrowly escapes death. I sense their rising bloodlust when a bout drags too long without decisive action. Their thunderous stamping shakes my very foundations when they demand death for a cowardly fighter. The emperor himself watches them as carefully as the games, for here, in my embrace, the true heart of Rome beats unguarded. They come not merely for entertainment, but to fulfill civic and religious duty. Games begin with solemn processions honoring the gods, with priests and sacrifices sanctifying the bloodshed to follow. Politicians host games to curry favor with the masses, a practice they call bread and circuses. The crowd's favor can elevate a nobody to consul or condemn a general to obscurity. I am Rome's true forum, where public opinion manifests in roars and silence. Within my walls, the collective mood of the empire reveals itself. During times of famine, the crowd grows restless and prone to riots. After military victories, they crave reenactments of the battle. When plague ravages the city, they seek distraction in increasingly elaborate spectacles. I have seen emperors rise and fall based on how well they read these moods. The crowd's thumbs hold more power than any senator's decree. I am more than stone and mortar. I am Rome's mirror, reflecting its glory and its brutality in equal measure. In my circular embrace, 100,000 citizens become one entity, sharing triumph and disappointment as one body, one voice. Here, the patrician and the plebeian find common ground in their shared humanity and shared bloodlust. Long after my games have ended, this is what endures. I showed Rome its true face. From my marble heights I've watched them all, the parade of emperors who graced my imperial box. Each arrival was a spectacle unto itself. Trumpets blared, the crowd rose as one, and there he stood, wreathed in purple, the living embodiment of Rome. None commanded presence like Trajan, whose muscular frame and stern profile became as familiar to me as my own stones. When he raised a hand, 50,000 voices fell silent. When he smiled, they roared like the sea. Trajan's games surpassed all others. For 123 days my sands drank deep as he celebrated his Dacian conquest. 11,000 beasts fell beneath spears and arrows. 10,000 gladiators fought, bled, and died. The logistics alone were a marvel, a testament to Rome's reach. Exotic animals from Africa and Asia, fighters from every province. The crowd's appetite seemed insatiable, and Trajan fed it generously. His thumb, raised more often than not, became a symbol of calculated mercy. Each emperor wielded me differently. Augustus used my predecessor, the wooden amphitheater, with political precision, games as policy, entertainment as control. Claudius attended with scholarly enthusiasm, particularly relishing executions with historical themes. Vespasian and Titus, my creators, displayed practical magnificence. But none matched the spectacle of Commodus, who shocked Rome by descending from his box to fight as a gladiator himself, though his opponents always mysteriously lost. The imperial thumb, what power in such a simple gesture! When death hung in the balance, all eyes turned to the emperor's hand. Thumbs up or thumbs down, mercy or death. Some emperors reveled in this power. Others seemed burdened by it. Marcus Aurelius barely watched the bloody spectacles, instead reading reports and signing documents while men died below. His thumb rarely moved at all, leaving the decision to the crowd's pleasure. My feelings toward these rulers were as complex as Rome itself. I depended on imperial favor for my very purpose, yet sometimes I despised what occurred within me. I felt pride when Hadrian discussed architecture with his engineers while seated in my box. I felt disgust when Caligula ordered additional executions because he found the day's entertainment lacking. I was both witness and accomplice to their greatest virtues and darkest impulses. I was both stage and threat to imperial power. Within my walls, an emperor could win the people with generosity or lose them through perceived weakness. The crowd's reaction could portend political storms. Wise emperors listened to the collective voice of Rome that echoed from my seats. Some were cheered, others jeered. Nero was said to have hired his own applauders. Pertinax was condemned by silence. In my arena, even emperors were judged, for here the people remembered they were Romans first. They call my sands sacred, but I call them my children, my gladiators, magnificent in their desperation, beautiful in their violence. I've felt the sweat of thousands soak into my grounds, their blood seeping into my foundation. The Thracians with their curved daggers and small shields, moving like dancers despite their heavy helmets. The Secutors pursuing their prey with calculated steps, their smooth helmets gleaming under the sun. Each type bred for spectacle, for death, for my entertainment. The retiarii fascinated me most, near naked save for arm guards and shoulder pieces, wielding only nets and tridents. I watched them train in the ludus adjacent to my walls, heard their grunts through the stone. The dimaceri with dual blades, spinning like whirlwinds of metal and flesh. Each morning they ate their sagina, barley, beans, dried fruit, building strength for battles where I would be their only constant companion. Before fights I witnessed their rituals, the burning of incense to gods who rarely answered. The final meals shared intense silence. Some carved names into my walls, desperate to be remembered. I felt their fear through trembling feet, their courage through steady strides as they entered my arena. The roar of the crowd washed over us both. Them in their final moments of anticipation, me in my eternal watchfulness. How strange to be both reviled and revered. My gladiators lived as property, yet died as heroes. The crowd's fickle love, their thumbs determining life or death, became the only currency that mattered. I've witnessed men fight 30 battles, their bodies maps of scar tissue, their minds hardened like the packed sand beneath their feet. The legendary Flamma offered freedom 4 times, who chose my embrace over liberty. What glory did he find in my dust? I remember them all, the Gaul who fought with such grace it seemed like dance, the African whose laughter echoed through my chambers before he met his end, the rare women who defied convention to bleed upon my floor. Some earned the wooden rudies of freedom, walking from my grounds as citizens reborn. Others I keep forever, their final breaths absorbed into my foundations, their spirits lingering in my shadows. They are my children of blood, these gladiators. I have cradled more dying men than any battlefield, felt their final moments as intimately as a mother feels her child's first breath. Their stories have become my story, their glory and pain woven into my stone and timber. When you walk upon my grounds today, know that you tread on memories. The sand may be gone, but if you listen closely enough, you might hear the echoes of their combat, their prayers, their final gasps, all preserved within me. You marvel at the exotic beasts emerging from the arena gates. Lions from Africa's scorching deserts, their manes catching the sunlight as they roar in confusion. Tigers from distant Persia, striped coats rippling as they pace. Never before had you imagined such creatures existed beyond tales told by returning soldiers. The crowd falls silent momentarily, then erupts as the animals register their new surroundings. Their presence alone reminds you how vast Rome's reach truly is. The logistical marvel behind these spectacles astounds you. Months earlier, specialized hunters captured these beasts in distant provinces. You've heard tales of the perilous journeys, animals transported in reinforced wooden cages across treacherous seas and mountain passes. Many perished en route. Those that survived were kept beneath the arena in dark cells, starved to increase their ferocity. The Empire's resources bent toward a single purpose: your entertainment. The Venators enter the arena now, specialized hunters dressed in light tunics, armed with spears and small shields. Their movements are practiced, graceful even, as they taunt and dodge the enraged beasts. Unlike the gladiators, these men are free citizens who chose this dangerous profession. You admire their skill while wondering what drives men to willingly face such dangers. The crowd cheers as a Venator rolls beneath a charging elephant, only to spring up and thrust his spear. The arena transforms before your eyes. Workers have created elaborate stage settings, artificial forests with real trees, desert landscapes with imported sand, even miniature lakes for aquatic displays. Today, a section resembles the banks of the Nile, complete with reeds and shallow water where crocodiles snap their massive jaws. The illusion is remarkable, transporting you to Egypt without leaving your seat. Such extravagance speaks to the emperor's generosity and power. You recall the games held for Titus's inauguration. 9,000 animals slaughtered over 100 days. Or Emperor Commodus, who fancied himself a skilled hunter, personally dispatching 100 lions in a single day from a protected platform. With each beast that falls, you feel conflicted emotions. The spectacle thrills you, yet watching these magnificent creatures die so far from their homelands stirs unexpected sympathy. You wonder how many remain in those distant lands. As the sand darkens with blood, you understand these games connect you to the empire's furthest reaches. Each dying creature represents a conquered land, a subjugated people. The message is clear. Rome commands not just humanity, but nature itself. You feel simultaneously proud and troubled. The crowd's roars fade momentarily as you contemplate the cost of such dominion. Entire species vanishing from their native lands, all to demonstrate Rome's power and satiate its citizens' appetite for the exotic. Dawn breaks over the arena. I witness slaves scurrying across my sands, raking fresh layers to cover yesterday's bloodstains. The mechanisms beneath my floor are checked meticulously. Trapdoors that will soon release beasts tested, pulleys oiled. Above, workers unfurl the vast velarium, its colored fabric billowing as it stretched to shield spectators from the climbing sun. The air still holds the morning's coolness, the last moments of peace before my stones will vibrate with the clamor of thousands. The Pampa begins. Trumpets blare as the procession enters through my western gate. First come musicians playing flutes and horns, then dancers in colorful garb. The crowd roars as gladiators march in full parade armor, weapons gleaming. Behind them walk the officials in purple trimmed togas, priests swinging censers of fragrant incense. The editor of the games raises his hand to the imperial box where Trajan sits, his golden laurel wreath catching the light. "We who are about to die salute you," echoes against my walls. Morning's events unfold within my circle. Condemned criminals are pushed into the arena, some fighting back tears, others resigned to their fate. Beasts are released. Lions from Africa, bears from the forests of Germania, their roars mixing with human screams. Between these bloody spectacles, comedic performers tumble and jest, drawing laughter from the same throats that moments before had shouted for death. The venatio follows. Skilled hunters displaying their prowess against exotic animals, arrows whistling through air thick with dust and anticipation. Midday brings a momentary lull. The crowd disperses to corridors where vendors sell wine, bread, and olives. Wealthy patrons retreat to shaded areas for elaborate meals, discussing morning events and placing bets on afternoon combats. In my arena, condemned criminals now die in mythological tableau. Icarus falling, Actaeon torn apart. The sand beneath them darkens. I feel each death, each drop of blood seeping into my foundations. Musicians play softly, almost drowned by the buzz of thousands conversing, a different kind of roar than the bloodlust of moments before. The afternoon brings my purpose, gladiatorial combat. The crowd surges back, wine-flushed and eager. Trumpets announce each pair of fighters Thracians with curved daggers, heavily armored Samnites, net-wielding retiarii. The ritual begins with salutes, then explodes into violence. I feel every footfall as they circle, every impact of blade on shield. Blood spatters my sand, turning it rust red. The crowd's mood shifts like weather, gasping at near misses, cheering skillful blows, collectively holding breath when a fighter falls. When the victor stands awaiting the editor's judgment, 40,000 voices become one. Evening approaches. The final combats conclude as shadows lengthen across my floor. Attendants drag away bodies, both human and animal. Slaves appear with rakes and fresh sand, erasing the day's carnage. The velarium is furled, letting the cooling air descend. Spectators file out through my 76 numbered exits, voices hoarse from shouting, discussing the day's highlights. As night falls, I stand empty but not silent. Echoes of the day's events seem to linger in my stones. Tomorrow will bring another tide of humanity, another cycle of blood and spectacle. For now, I rest. The sun climbs higher as the crowd grows restless. You hear the distinct sound of chains dragging across stone. The condemned emerge from the dark tunnels below, blinking in the harsh light. Their faces contort with terror as they comprehend their fate. Some weep silently, others stand defiant. These are the damnati ad bestias, criminals sentenced to die by tooth and claw for your entertainment, and for Rome's justice. The herald's voice booms across your sand, announcing each man's crime. Murderers, traitors, thieves who stole from temples. The crowd jeers, thirsting for retribution. You've become Rome's instrument of justice, where punishment is spectacle. The magistrates watch from their elevated seats, nodding with satisfaction. This is not mere bloodshed. It is the law made visible, a deterrent displayed for all to witness and remember in their darkest moments of temptation. The Noxi, the lowest of the condemned, receive no mercy, no chance of survival. Unlike gladiators with their rituals and potential glory, these souls are merely fodder. Some are tied to posts as hungry beasts are released. Others are forced into grotesque reenactments of myths. Icarus falling, Actaeon torn apart. A man playing Prometheus has his abdomen sliced open. The crowd roars with each death, their bloodlust momentarily sated before demanding more. You've witnessed different deaths for different crimes. Arsonists burn at stakes, their screams echoing off your walls. Deserters from the legions face the animals or each other's swords. After Spartacus fell, 6,000 of his followers lined the Appian Way, crucified as examples. The executions grow more elaborate with each emperor. Nero uses Christians as human torches. Domitian stages hunts where the condemned have no weapons. Your sand drinks it all. After rebellions, the executions come in waves. Hundreds die in a single day, their deaths a footnote before the main gladiatorial combat. Even senators occasionally meet their end on your sand, when emperors purge their enemies. You remember one patrician woman who walked proudly to her death after conspiring against Claudius. The crowd fell silent at her dignity, rare respect for the condemned. These memories weigh on you differently than the glorious duels of trained fighters. You've become synonymous with ultimate punishment in the Roman mind. To the lions is whispered as the most terrible fate imaginable. Not just death, but public humiliation, suffering as entertainment. Sometimes you feel the weight of all this death, so different from the ritualized combat of gladiators. You were built for glory, but have become stained with the blood of the defenseless. Yet tomorrow will bring more of the condemned, and you will witness their final moments as Rome demands. They called them enemies of Rome, these followers of Christus. I witnessed their persecution unfold within my walls as emperors, from Nero to Diocletian, sought to crush this stubborn faith. These Christians refused to burn incense to our gods or acknowledge the emperor's divinity, acts of treason in Roman eyes. Their loyalty to an invisible deity and a crucified criminal mystified the authorities and inflamed public hatred. I remember Ignatius of Antioch dragged into my center in 107 A.D. The crowd roared as he entered, yet he showed no fear. "I am God's wheat," he declared, "and I shall be ground by the teeth of wild beasts." The lions were released, their roars echoing off my walls. The spectators leaned forward, expecting entertainment from his terror, but found themselves witnessing something else entirely. A man embracing death with serene conviction. The methods of execution varied with imperial whims. Some Christians were covered in animal skins and torn apart by dogs. Others were crucified and set ablaze as human torches for Nero's gardens. Women like Perpetua and Felicity faced wild bulls before the executioner's sword. The crowds often demanded these spectacles, shouting, "Christianos ad leones," Christians to the lions, while I silently absorbed their blood into my sand. Their deaths confused me. Unlike other condemned souls who trembled and begged, these Christians often sang hymns and forgave their executioners. Some spectators mocked this foolishness, but others grew uneasy. I felt their courage seep into my foundations with each drop of martyr's blood. What power could make humans face death so willingly? What conviction could transform terror into transcendence? I began to sense something profound was happening within me. The irony came later, when Constantine's vision changed everything. The empire that had slaughtered Christians in my arena now embraced their faith. My sands, once soaked with martyrs' blood, became hallowed ground. A cross was erected in my center, not for execution, but for veneration. I, who had been an instrument of their destruction, was later preserved partly out of respect for the very souls who had perished within me. Their deaths planted seeds of transformation within me. The faith Rome tried to exterminate in my arena eventually became the empire's dominant religion, changing my very meaning. From a theater of death, I evolved into a monument to conviction. The martyr's courage revealed something eternal about the human spirit, how the weakest, armed with unshakable belief, could ultimately outlast the mightiest empire. Their memory lives in my stones. The blood games changed with Rome herself. By the 2nd century, as you watched from your seat in the Colosseum, you noticed subtle differences. Trajan, fresh from Dacian conquests, staged spectacles of unprecedented scale. 1,000 gladiators fighting over 123 consecutive days. The arena floor swam with blood, yet the combat seemed more regulated, the referees more prominent. The crowd's appetites had grown sophisticated. They no longer cheered for mere slaughter, but appreciated technical skill. You noticed how each emperor stamped his character upon the games. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, attended out of duty but averted his eyes, working on state papers during the bloodshed. The combats under his reign became briefer, less frequent. Then came Commodus, Jupiter's madness incarnate, who shocked Rome by entering the arena himself. You watched, breath held, as your emperor slaughtered ostriches with crescent-headed arrows, his narcissism transforming sacred tradition into personal theater. The Severan dynasty brought North African sensibilities to the games. Septimius Severus, born in Leptis Magna, introduced new fighting styles and exotic beasts from his homeland. You marveled at spotted leopards and desert lions never before seen in Rome. The music changed too, foreign rhythms accompanying the combats. Even the architecture of temporary arenas reflected this cultural shift, with colorful awnings and palm decorations reminiscent of African amphitheaters. Economic pressures transformed the games before your eyes. As the 3rd century progressed, you noticed fewer trained gladiators, expensive investments, replaced by condemned criminals forced to fight without training. The skilled combat you once admired gave way to crude executions dressed as mythological reenactments. The midday intermissions grew longer, filled with elaborate public punishments. You sensed Rome's changing fortunes in these substitutions, the empire straining to maintain appearances of abundance. The logistics of the games revealed Rome's expanding challenges. You overheard merchants discussing the difficulty of sourcing animals, elephants from increasingly distant African territories, tigers from Hyrcania beyond the troubled eastern frontier. Ships dedicated solely to transporting beasts returned half empty, or not at all. The announcements before the games now emphasized the rarity of certain spectacles, preparing the crowd for fewer exotic displays. Even the quality of weapons and armor declined, though they were polished to disguise inferior metals. You felt it in your bones. The games, like Rome herself, were transforming. Watching from the stands in the late 3rd century, you recognized the spectacles of your youth only in their outline. The religious ceremonies opening the games grew shorter, their meaning less understood by the crowd. New cults from the East influenced the symbolism. The very architecture of temporary arenas showed signs of hasty construction. The games endured, but like a statue weathered by time, their classical form was eroding into something altogether different. I remember the terror of that night in 217 AD when lightning split the sky above me. The bolt struck without mercy, igniting my wooden upper levels in moments. Flames danced across my seating, consuming centuries of craftsmanship. My stone groaned as fire licked at my core, blackening my marble and cracking my travertine skin. The screams of my caretakers echoed through my corridors as they frantically tried to save what they could. I had faced gladiators and beasts, but fire was my true nemesis. The aftermath was devastating. My charred skeleton stood exposed to the elements, abandoned and silent. No longer did I echo with the roars of crowds or feel the vibration of spectacles. Rain fell through my broken roof, pooling in my arena where once sand had soaked up blood. For years, I remained a wounded giant, a reminder of Rome's vulnerability. The emperors debated my fate while I waited, wondering if I would ever again host the games that defined my purpose. Emperor Alexander Severus finally ordered my restoration. Stonemasons and carpenters swarmed over me like ants, replacing my scorched timbers and strengthening my weakened walls. I felt their hands caress my wounds, applying new marble veneers and rebuilding my seating tiers. When Alexander was assassinated, I feared abandonment again, but Gordian III continued to work with equal determination. Their commitment wasn't merely to me, but to what I represented, Rome's enduring spirit and traditions. For 23 years, I underwent transformation. Each day brought new sounds, hammers striking chisels, saws cutting timber, men shouting instructions in Latin and Greek. The emperors spared no expense. This was their legacy too. They added gilded decorations I'd never worn before and modified my hypergeum with newer, more efficient mechanisms. I was not becoming what I had been. I was becoming something more. A blend of old and new, my scars now covered with fresh finery that told stories of resilience. When I finally reopened in 240 AD, Rome celebrated as if welcoming back an old friend. Citizens flooded my corridors, marveling at my rebirth. The games resumed with spectacular displays commissioned by Gordian III himself. Yet I was changed, not just in appearance but in essence. I had learned vulnerability. My stone was not eternal. I too could perish. This humility became part of me, a wisdom earned through suffering. Each repaired block held memories of both destruction and renewal. This cycle would repeat throughout my life, damage and restoration, wound and healing. Each emperor who repaired me claimed a piece of my legacy, using my restoration to connect themselves to Rome's glorious past. And with each rebirth, I welcomed new generations who knew nothing of my previous form. They saw only the present me, not the versions that came before. Yet I remembered them all, each incarnation layered within my stones like memories. Each restoration a testament to Rome's refusal to let its greatest monuments fade into history. Strange whispers reach your stones in the early 3rd century. Followers of a crucified Judean refuse to burn incense to the emperor or attend your spectacles. Their numbers grow despite persecution, their faith spreading like shadow across your sunlit purpose. You notice them in the crowd, those who turn away during the killing stroke, who will not cheer the execution of their fellows. The old certainties begin to waver as their silent protest takes root. Diocletian's great persecution fails to stamp out this growing faith. Instead, the courage of martyrs facing beasts in your arena only strengthens Christian resolve. You feel the discomfort ripple through the crowds when believers die singing hymns rather than screaming in terror. Some spectators weep openly, others convert on the spot. The blood that once consecrated you to Roman gods now somehow sanctifies their stubborn faith. Then comes the unthinkable. The Edict of Milan in 313. Constantine grants tolerance to these Christians, and rumors spread that he himself has converted. The priests who once blessed your games with sacrifices grow fewer. The elite who funded spectacular bloodshed now build churches instead. Your purpose trembles as the philosophical foundations beneath you shift. The virtues you embodied, courage, strength, the conquest of death, are being reinterpreted by this strange Eastern cult. Your schedule of games, thins as decades pass. The aristocrats who once competed to sponsor the most lavish spectacles now fear for their souls. When Constantine's sons take power, they begin restricting the traditional games. Your sand sees fewer deaths, more theatrical performances. Criminals condemned to the beasts are granted reprieves. Gladiators more frequently fight to first blood rather than to death. You sense your very identity changing. By the mid-4th century, Christian bishops openly condemned the games. Saint Augustine recalls how his friend Alypius was dragged to your spectacles, covered his eyes, but upon hearing the roar of the crowd, looked and became intoxicated with bloodlust against his will. This story spreads, warning of your corrupting influence. The Emperor Julian briefly attempts to restore traditional religion, but his death ends this respite. You feel the tide of history turning against you. As the century closes, Emperor Honorius prohibits gladiatorial combat in 399, though the ban is not immediately enforced. You sense your long twilight beginning. The values that justified your existence for centuries, the celebration of martial virtue, the demonstration of Rome's power, the ritualized confrontation with death, no longer resonate with a population increasingly drawn to promises of eternal life rather than glorious death. Your purpose wavers as Rome itself undergoes spiritual transformation. The year 330 brought a wound deeper than any gladiator's blade. Constantine, your emperor, abandoned Rome for his new eastern capital. You felt the loss acutely as your stones vibrated with whispers of betrayal. The grand processions that once led to your arena grew sparse. Constantinople rose while Rome's heartbeat faltered. The imperial purple, the treasury, the court all vanished eastward, leaving you to wonder if glory had abandoned the eternal city forever. Your games continued, but diminished in grandeur. Where once emperors presided over spectacles lasting weeks, now lesser officials oversaw abbreviated contests. The finest gladiators followed power eastward. Those who remained fought with less pageantry before smaller crowds. The gold that once gilded your ceremonies tarnished. You watched citizens who had roared for blood, now whispering of strange new faiths. Constantine himself straddled two worlds, building Christian basilicas while permitting your ancient traditions to continue, albeit weakened. Constantine's ambivalence toward you cut deeply. Though he never outlawed the games outright, his edicts limited gladiatorial combat. You sensed his divided heart, a ruler raised in pagan tradition, yet embracing the cross. The emperor, who once celebrated Rome's 1,000-year traditions, now redirected the empire's wealth to gleaming churches and eastern palaces. Your stone corridors echoed with fewer footsteps each season, as if Rome itself were becoming a memory rather than the world's center. The city around you transformed with unsettling speed. Temples that had stood for centuries fell quiet, their priests fewer, their sacrifices diminished. Christian basilicas rose on the city's outskirts, drawing crowds that once filled your seats. Rome's population dwindled as ambitious citizens followed opportunity eastward. You watched patrician villas emptying, shops closing, the marble that once flowed into Rome for new monuments now shipped to Constantinople. You stood as a reminder of fading glory while the empire's heart beat elsewhere. Your identity fractured as Rome's did. Were you still the empire's greatest arena if the emperor never visited? The games continued through sheer momentum of tradition, but each season brought subtle changes. Gladiatorial combat grew less frequent, animal hunts more common. Christian voices in the Senate questioned the morality of your bloody spectacles. You, who had witnessed centuries of unwavering Roman certainty, now felt the ground shifting. The old gods received fewer prayers, while the cross appeared on more doorways each year. By decade's end, you understood your new role, no longer the beating heart of a vibrant empire, but a monument to what Rome had been. Your massive stone presence reminded citizens of former greatness, while Constantine's new capital claimed the future. You stood witness to Rome's transformation from ruler of the world to one city among many in an empire looking eastward. Yet, in your ancient stones, the memory of countless roaring crowds remained. Rome might diminish, but you would endure, carrying its story through the uncertain centuries ahead. The winds of change swept through your arena in the late 4th century. You noticed the growing unease among certain spectators, their faces tightening with disapproval during the bloodier contests. Christian voices grew louder in Rome, their leaders condemning what had once been sacred tradition. St. Augustine's powerful words echoed through the city. "What are these games of yours but vanity and madness?" The criticism cut deeper than any gladiator's blade. St. Ambrose proved particularly relentless, his influence reaching the imperial court itself. You witnessed nobles who once eagerly sponsored games now turning away, ashamed. The Christian faith spread through every level of society, bringing with it a moral objection to your bloody spectacles. Emperor Honorius wavered under this pressure, issuing the first edicts limiting combat. The crowds grew thinner. Your ancient stones absorbed their diminishing roars like fading echoes of a bygone era. Then came the day that sealed your fate. A monk named Telemachus, driven by religious fervor, leapt from the stands onto your sacred sand. "In the name of Christ, stop!" he cried, rushing between two battling gladiators. The crowd's mood soured instantly. Rage erupted as this outsider dared interrupt their entertainment. Stones flew. Telemachus fell, his blood joining countless others who had died upon your floor, but his death would change everything. Honorius, shaken by the monk's martyrdom, finally issued his fateful edict in 404 AD. Gladiatorial combat was banned throughout the empire. You felt the pronouncement like a physical blow, as if your very foundations had been struck. The gladiator schools emptied. The weapons were stored away. The training grounds fell silent. For centuries, you had been defined by these contests of skill and courage. Now, that identity was stripped away, leaving you hollow. Your emotions were conflicted. Relief washed through you as the constant bloodshed ceased, yet nostalgia lingered for the discipline, skill, and sacred rituals that had defined true gladiatorial combat. You had witnessed both its noblest expressions and its cruelest excesses. The spectacles changed chariot races grew more elaborate, theatrical performances more grandiose. Animal hunts continued, though with diminishing frequency as exotic beasts became harder to procure. The end of gladiatorial combat marked more than just a change in entertainment. It signaled Rome's fundamental transformation. As your sands absorbed the last echoes of the gladiators' steps, you sensed the empire itself was changing beyond recognition. Christian basilicas rose where temples once stood. Old gods faded as the new faith flourished. You remained, a stone witness to Rome's metamorphosis, carrying memories of centuries when gladiators defined what it meant to be Roman. The rumbling grew closer with each passing year. You sensed it first through whispers among the patricians, then the dwindling shipments of beasts from Africa. The barbarians, Goths, Vandals, Huns, names once distant threats now pressed against Rome's borders. Supply routes for exotic animals became treacherous. The magnificent beast fights that once made your arena roar with excitement grew sparse. You felt the empire contracting around you, the grand spectacles becoming memories. Then came the unthinkable. In 410, Alaric and his Visigoths breached the walls, Rome taken for the first time in 8 centuries. From your massive stone frame, you watched smoke rise above the city. The invaders, perhaps awed by your grandeur or focused on richer treasures, left you largely untouched. But the psychological wound to Rome was profound. Citizens who once debated gladiatorial techniques now spoke in hushed tones about survival, about whether the eternal city was eternal after all. The respite was brief. In 455, the Vandals under Gaiseric came with more methodical purpose. For 14 days, they stripped Rome of its treasures. Your bronze decorations, the gleaming statues that adorned your upper levels, torn away for their metal. The mechanisms beneath your arena floor, marvels of engineering that once raised exotic beasts to surprise the crowd, fell into disrepair as skilled engineers fled or were captured. The empire that built you was dissolving before your very arches. Emperors became mere figureheads, their purple robes draping men who held less power than the barbarian generals commanding what remained of Rome's armies. The great games that once required imperial approval and funding withered. Your sand, once stained with the blood of gladiatorial combat, now grew sparse tufts of weeds between less frequent events. The administrative system that maintained your greatness, the dedicated teams of slaves, engineers, and managers, disbanded as the empire's bureaucracy crumbled. Rome's population dwindled from nearly 1 million souls to mere thousands. The roaring crowds that once filled your tiers to capacity became impossible to gather. Entire sections of your seating stood empty during the increasingly rare spectacles. You, built to showcase Rome's engineering might and social order, now witnessed that order's collapse. The aqueducts that fed your naval battle displays ran dry. The complex social hierarchy reflected in your seating arrangements blurred as old distinctions of class lost meaning. Yet you endured. While Rome's political power faded, your walls remained. As you watched the unthinkable, Rome conquered, imperial systems failing, old certainties crumbling. You became something new. No longer just an arena for spectacle, but a monument to what Rome had been. The world that created you ended, but you stood as testimony to its greatest achievements. In the twilight of empire, your massive presence reminded all who gazed upon you that greatness, though not eternal, leaves echoes that resound through centuries. As the 5th century waned, an unexpected champion emerged in your history. Theodoric the Great, king of the Ostrogoths, conquered Italy in 493 and, unlike many barbarian rulers, gazed upon your weathered stones with reverence rather than contempt. Raised in the sophisticated courts of Constantinople, he understood what you represented. Preserve Rome's greatness, he commanded his officials. for it is the most magnificent achievement of man's genius. You felt his hands upon your wounds as he ordered repairs to your crumbling sections. Though a Germanic king, Theodoric styled himself custodian of Roman civilization, maintaining a dual society where Goths served as warriors while Romans administered civil affairs. His coins bore the motto, Renovatio Imperii, restoration of empire. And remarkably, after decades of silence, the sounds of spectacle once more echoed through your corridors. The games Theodoric revived were shadows of your former glory. No gladiators clashed upon your sands. Those bloody contests had been abolished a century before. Instead, venations returned, exotic beasts imported at great expense to thrill the crowds. Athletic competitions showcased feats of strength and speed. Theatrical performances brought laughter and drama. For a moment, it seemed the old ways might endure, even under foreign rule. In 523 AD, nearly 450 years after your inauguration under the Flavian emperors, the last recorded games were held within your elliptical embrace. Cassiodorus, Theodoric's Roman secretary, noted the event with pride in his chronicles, unaware he was documenting the final chapter of your original purpose. The crowd's roars that day eventually faded into silence, a silence that would persist for centuries. You knew what Theodoric perhaps did not, that his noble experiment teetered on the edge of history's abyss. The Western Empire had fallen. Constantinople's gaze rarely turned toward Rome now. The economic networks that once supplied your spectacles with performers and beasts from across 3 continents had unraveled. The wealth that funded such extravagance had diminished. The world that built you was passing away. 3 years later, Theodoric died. The Gothic War soon erupted between his successors and Justinian's Byzantine forces, devastating the Italian peninsula. Your stones trembled with the distant thunder of armies on the march. The brief renaissance Theodoric had kindled flickered and died, like a torch dropped into your vast, darkening arena. The games were over. The crowds were gone. A profound silence settled over your ancient stones. I felt it first as a distant rumble, like the roar of a crowd I once knew so well. The year was 429, and Rome's glory had faded, but I stood proud still. Then came the shaking, violent, merciless. My stones, set so perfectly by ancient hands, began to tremble and shift. The earth itself betrayed me, sending waves through my foundations. I had withstood the cheers of thousands, the blood of gladiators, but against nature's fury, I found myself defenseless. The quake of 443 struck with even greater vengeance. I felt my southern wall give way, stones that had stood for centuries cascading down in a thunderous roar. My hypogeum, the underground chambers where beasts and men once awaited their fate, collapsed in sections, burying the ghosts of my past. No emperor rushed to my aid. No master architects assessed my wounds. In this new Rome, I was but a remnant of faded glory, and resources flowed elsewhere while I bled stone and mortar. By 508, when the earth shook again, I had grown accustomed to abandonment. This tremor attacked what remained of my outer ring, sending more of my facade tumbling down. The intricate carvings that once told Rome's story were reduced to rubble. The marble that had adorned my passages was plundered or buried. Each collapse transformed me. No longer the perfect oval that had inspired awe, but a jagged shadow of my former self, my silhouette against the Roman sky forever altered. The repairs, when they came, were modest and pragmatic. No longer did craftsmen seek to restore my grandeur. They merely prevented further collapse. Men with rough hands and limited tools shored up vulnerable sections, using stones scavenged from my own fallen pieces. Some areas were simply abandoned, deemed too dangerous or costly to repair. The eastern arcade was reinforced with timber braces, temporary solutions that would outlast generations. My wounds were bandaged but never truly healed. I learned pain during these years, not the quick agony of battle, but the slow suffering of neglect. The empire that built me no longer possessed the knowledge to heal me. The mathematics of my perfect arches, the secrets of my concrete, had faded from memory like so many other Roman arts. Each rainfall found new paths through my broken ceiling. Each winter, frost wedged deeper into my cracks. I was becoming something new, not a building with purpose, but a monument to what once was. The earthquakes marked my transition from building to ruin, from function to memory. Yet in my broken state, I found a new kind of immortality. The perfect Colosseum of the Flavians would have been rebuilt or replaced in time, but I, the wounded giant, would endure as testament to what Rome had been. My very incompleteness told Rome's story more honestly than any intact monument could. In my cracks and missing stones lay the truth of empire, that even the mightiest works of man must eventually bow to time and nature. The games ended, and with them, my purpose. By the mid-6th century, the last echoes of cheering crowds faded into silence. The devastating Gothic war between Byzantium and the Ostrogoths ravaged Italy, leaving Rome a shadow of its former glory. Your once mighty capital dwindled to barely 20,000 souls, huddled in the Campus Martius, far from my abandoned walls. I stood empty, my magnificent arches framing only the passing clouds. Nature became my only constant companion. Persistent seedlings found purchase between my weathered stones, pushing roots into cracks that widened with each winter frost. Rainwater pooled in my underground chambers where gladiators once prepared for battle. Birds nested in my highest reaches, their songs replacing the roars of spectators. Wild dogs and foxes made homes in my shadowy corridors. My stone facade, once polished and proud, began surrendering to wind and rain. The Lombards swept into Italy next, further scattering what remained of Roman authority. I watched as the Forum fell into disuse. Magnificent temples crumbled and palaces stood empty. The knowledge of how to maintain my complex structure vanished with the engineers and architects who had passed their craft through generations. No more would skilled hands replace my damaged stones or clear my drains. I began to understand a new kind of existence, not as a living monument but as a slowly fading memory. Occasional visitors broke my solitude. Pilgrims whispered prayers at spots where Christian martyrs had supposedly met their fate in my arena. Local Romans came with tools, prying loose my metal clamps and hauling away stones for new buildings. Byzantine officials passed through, making half-hearted inventories of Rome's remaining treasures. A nobleman might bring guests to marvel at my scale, their voices echoing strangely in my emptiness. Each footstep seemed amplified in the absence of the multitudes. The city transformed around me. New churches rose using marble stripped from ancient monuments. The aqueducts that once fed my naval battles lay broken, and wells replaced running water. Rome's center shifted, leaving me at the edge of inhabited areas. At night, I stood as a dark silhouette against the stars, my empty archways like countless black eyes staring into nothing. The silence of my arena floor, once soaked with blood and glory, became profound, disturbed only by the whisper of wind. I became a silent witness to a transformed world. No longer did I represent the height of Roman engineering and imperial might. Instead, I stood as testament to what had been lost. The glory of Rome lived on only in crumbling stone and fading memory. Yet even as I decayed, I endured. My massive foundations held firm against time itself. Perhaps this was my new purpose, not to host spectacles, but to remember them, to stand as proof that even the greatest empires eventually return to dust and silence. Centuries passed, and my official title, Flavian Amphitheater, began to fade from memory. The colossal statue of Emperor Nero that stood nearby became my namesake. Colosseum, they called me, though ironically, the statue itself had long since vanished. How strange to be renamed for something that no longer existed, as if we were both ghosts haunting the same ground. Rome herself had transformed. No longer the seat of emperors, but of popes, the city had shrunk to a fraction of her former glory. Where once 1,000,000 souls bustled, now perhaps 30,000 remained. The Forum lay abandoned, my marble stripped for churches. I stood as a monument to a vanished empire, while pilgrims flocked to martyrs' shrines instead of gladiatorial spectacles. I felt conflicted about my new identity. There was pride in remaining noteworthy enough to need a name at all. Many of my contemporaries had been forgotten entirely. Yet being defined by proximity to Nero's vanished statue seemed almost comical. I had outlived emperors and their monuments, but could not escape their shadows. My stones remembered my true name even as human tongues forgot it. My physical condition deteriorated with each passing decade. No emperor commissioned repairs. No architect supervised maintenance. Rain seeped into cracks, freezing and expanding in winter. In 847, the earth itself betrayed me, shaking violently and collapsing portions of my southern wall. I shed stones like tears, my perfect symmetry now broken by nature's slow revenge against human ambition. To the Romans of this new age, I became something mysterious, a place of legends. Some whispered I was built by giants or through ancient magic beyond mortal comprehension. Others crossed themselves when passing, believing demons haunted my shadows. The bravest ventured inside to quarry my fallen stones, treating me as a convenient resource rather than a sacred space. How quickly glory fades to utility. Names carry meaning beyond mere sounds. My transition from Flavian Amphitheater to Colosseum marked my passage from living institution to historical relic. No longer the pride of a present empire, but the echo of a vanished world. Yet in this new name I found unexpected immortality. The empire that built me crumbled, but I endured. Nameless, I might have been forgotten entirely. Once a monument to imperial glory, I was transformed into something entirely different. The powerful Frangipani family seized me in the 12th century, seeing not my grandeur but my potential as a fortress. They built towers upon my upper tiers and sealed many of my entrances, treating my ancient stones as mere building blocks for their defensive ambitions. My magnificent arches, once celebrating Rome's victories, now supported the walls of a medieval stronghold. Rome had changed beyond recognition. The city of emperors had fractured into territories controlled by competing noble families. The Frangipani and Annibaldi fought for dominance, while popes and Holy Roman emperors pulled strings from afar. Urban warfare erupted in streets once orderly with Roman discipline. I stood not as a place of entertainment, but as a strategic high ground, my walls witnessing the chaos of a city divided against itself. How undignified my new purpose felt. My grand public spaces were divided into private chambers by crude walls. My arena, once hosting spectacles for thousands, became a courtyard for household activities. The passages where emperors had processed now housed soldiers and servants. The Frangipani sealed my northern entrance entirely, replacing my welcoming arches with defensive barriers designed to repel rather than invite. The modifications were extensive and unsympathetic to my original design. Wooden floors divided my vertical space into multiple levels. Makeshift roofs covered areas once open to the sky. Arrow slits replaced windows, and defensive battlements crowned my upper rim. My elegant travertine facing was pried away in places, repurposed for other buildings or burned for lime. I became a fortress wrapped around the skeleton of an amphitheater. Daily life within my walls changed completely. No longer did I host the roaring crowds of the games. Instead, I sheltered the private activities of a noble household. In my chambers, the Frangipani stored grain and wine. Their soldiers drilled in spaces where gladiators once fought. Blacksmiths forged weapons in corners where vendors once sold refreshments. Children played in the shadows of walls that had witnessed imperial pageantry. What irony in my transformation! I, who once showcased imperial power, now concealed private ambition. Built to include all of Rome in shared spectacle, I now excluded most Romans behind defensive walls. My meaning inverted from celebration to fortification, from public to private, from entertainment to survival. Yet, in becoming a fortress, I survived an age that might otherwise have dismantled me entirely for building materials. Even in indignity, I endured. They came with tools and carts when Rome's glory was reborn. Renaissance men with calculating eyes, measuring my stones, assessing my worth not as monument but as material. Their hands traced my marble veins, tapped my travertine blocks, nodded at the iron clamps holding me together. All valuable, all ripe for harvest. I felt their intent before the first chisel struck. The first extraction was a betrayal. Stonecutters wedged their tools between my facing blocks, leveraging centuries of perfect fit until connections cracked. Metalworkers followed, extracting the iron clamps that had held me together through earthquakes and storms. My bones loaded onto wagons. I watched pieces of myself disappear down Rome's ancient streets, destined for new lives in palaces and churches. The popes who ordered my dismemberment saw themselves as Rome's new emperors. Urban renewal required materials, and I stood as a convenient quarry. No longer sacred monument, but stone repository. Each block removed left me more hollow. Each metal clamp extracted weakened my skeleton. I was being erased not by time, but by purpose, my death feeding Rome's rebirth like a sacrifice to forgotten gods. I recognized my stones and new walls rising throughout the city. My travertine formed the elegant arches of Palazzo Venezia. My marble adorned the Palazzo della Cancelleria. Most painful was seeing my bronze and stone incorporated into St. Peter's Basilica, my pagan body transfigured into Christianity's greatest shrine. I was scattered yet preserved, dismembered yet immortalized in this strange architectural diaspora. Romans coined a bitter rhyme during those years. Quod non fecerunt barbari, fecerunt barberini. What the barbarians could not accomplish, the Barberini family finished. Pope Urban VIII Barberini stripped my bronze to cast the massive baldachin in St. Peter's. The Goths and Vandals had looted, but never so systematically as Rome's own leaders, who harvested me with methodical precision. This quarrying was a strange form of survival. While my original form diminished, pieces of me lived on throughout Rome. I became both less and more than myself, no longer whole but widely dispersed, my essence integrated into the city's rebirth. My stones still stand, though in different formations. Perhaps this transformation was not death, but metamorphosis. My body sacrificed so my spirit could infuse a new Rome. In 1749, Pope Benedict XIV consecrated your stones to the memory of Christian martyrs who died within your walls. The papal decree officially ended centuries of quarrying that had stripped away your grandeur. Your identity transformed overnight, no longer a source of building materials, but hallowed ground. The irony wasn't lost on you. The same faith whose followers once died for entertainment in your arena now claimed you as their sacred site. The Stations of the Cross appeared within your walls, 14 wooden markers tracing Christ's final hours. On Good Fridays, the Pope himself led processions through your arena, the Via Crucis drawing thousands. Torchlight flickered against your ancient stones as prayers echoed where once crowds had roared for blood. You found yourself reborn as a pilgrimage destination, your violent past redeemed through sacred ritual. This transformation coincided with the Counter-Reformation's emphasis on martyrdom sites. The Catholic Church sought to reclaim its history, and you became a powerful symbol. Simultaneously, a new archaeological consciousness emerged. Scholars began advocating for preservation rather than plunder. Your stones were no longer building materials, but historical treasures, worthy of study and protection. Physical changes accompanied your spiritual rebirth. A massive cross rose from your arena floor, standing defiant against time. Workers cleared the wild vegetation that had claimed your corridors and stabilized your crumbling sections. For the first time in centuries, someone cared about your survival. Though you'd lost much of your original splendor, these interventions halted your slow disintegration. Early tourists flocked to your grounds, guidebooks in hand. Souvenir sellers hawked medallions bearing your image. Romantic visitors sought moonlight tours, inspired by poets who'd written of your melancholy beauty. You became a must-see destination on the Grand Tour, with aristocratic travelers from across Europe sketching your ruins and contemplating your fallen majesty. This Christian reconsecration added yet another layer to your complex identity. Your bloody past wasn't erased, but reinterpreted through a spiritual lens. Suffering transformed into sacrifice, entertainment into martyrdom. You carried within your stones the memory of gladiators and beasts, emperors and slaves, and now saints and pilgrims. Each age had claimed you, and each had left its mark upon your weathered form. As dawn broke over the 18th century, I found myself transformed. No longer merely a crumbling testament to past glory, I became something far more profound, a canvas for romantic dreams. Poets and painters discovered in my weathered stones not failure, but sublime beauty. My partial collapse, the vegetation embracing my walls, features once marking my decline, now embodied a new aesthetic ideal. I stood as living proof that ruins could speak to the soul. The Grand Tour brought Europe's elite to my doorstep. Young aristocrats stood breathless before me, completing their education in classical beauty. Giovanni Paolo Panini captured my essence in luminous oils, while Piranesi's etchings exaggerated my proportions to impossible grandeur. I became larger than life, not just architecture, but emotion itself. How strange to find my decay celebrated, my broken arches more valued than when they stood whole. Byron's verses elevated me to immortality. A ruin, yet what ruin from its mass, walls, palaces, half-cities, have been reared. Shelley found in my weathered form the poetry of history. Their words transformed me from stone to symbol, a meditation on time's passage and civilization's fragility. Moonlight would bathe my chambers, and I'd hear whispers of those seeking the sublime experience promised in their poetry. Archaeology emerged as a discipline, and I became its greatest laboratory. Men with measuring tapes and notebooks crawled through my passages, cataloging every stone. Each fallen column told a story. Each crack revealed history's secrets. The emerging nationalist movements claimed me as heritage, proof of cultural superiority through connection to ancient Rome. I was no longer just a building but evidence, identity, legacy. My physical state perfectly embodied the romantic ideal, partially collapsed yet defiant, weathered yet magnificent. Sunset would set my travertine ablaze with golden light, creating the dramatic chiaroscuro. Painters traveled continents to capture. Vegetation claimed my upper tiers, nature and architecture in poetic dialogue. I was no longer valued for use but for contemplation, a philosophical prompt carved in stone. I acquired yet another identity in this era, cultural icon transcending my specific history. No longer just an amphitheater, I became shorthand for civilization itself. While stands the Colosseum, Rome shall stand, they quoted, though Rome had fallen long ago. I embodied humanity's greatest achievements and inevitable decline, simultaneously celebrating and cautioning. How strange to find my greatest purpose not in my completeness, but in my beautiful decay. The silence that had enveloped me for centuries was finally broken in the early 19th century. Carlo Fea, a passionate antiquarian with determined eyes, led the first systematic excavations of my hypogeum in 1810. I felt the weight of earth being lifted from my bones as his workers carefully removed debris that had accumulated since the 6th century. For the first time in over a millennium, sunlight touched the chambers where wild beasts once waited to meet their fate. Antonio Nibbi continued this work in the 1830s, meticulously documenting my architectural secrets. I remember his gentle touch as he traced the outlines of my elevator shafts, the ingenious mechanisms that once lifted gladiators and beasts into the arena. Each scrape of his trowel revealed another fragment of my true self, not the romanticized ruin of poets, but the sophisticated machine of entertainment I had once been. His drawings captured details I had almost forgotten myself. The great Rodolfo Lanciani brought modern scientific methods to my study in the 1870s. This coincided with Italy's unification, a new nation looking to my stones for identity and pride. I felt their patriotic gaze upon me, no longer just a monument, but a symbol of their heritage. Lanciani's systematic approach uncovered the complex drainage systems beneath my floor, the clever engineering that allowed for naval battles. Each discovery stripped away centuries of myth and revealed the brilliant Roman minds that conceived me. I felt conflicted as they peeled away my layers. The satisfaction of being understood mingled with the vulnerability of exposure. When they discovered fragments of marble decorations, lions, bulls, and hunting scenes that once adorned my walls, I remembered my former splendor. The unearthing of iron fittings that secured my great Valeria awning brought back memories of crowds sheltered from the blistering sun. These archaeologists were reading my biography written in stone and metal. The excavations of 1895 brought my most intimate secrets to light, the Hypogeum completely revealed. I shuddered as they uncovered the small objects lost during spectacles, a gladiator's bronze helmet clasp, bone gaming dice dropped by spectators, and a carved ivory ticket token. These humble items spoke of the lives that once animated me. Each artifact catalogued and each wall measured transformed me from legend to historical document, my stones now speaking with the authority of evidence rather than whispers of imagination. By the early 20th century, I stood more fully revealed than at any time since antiquity. The archaeologists had given me a new purpose, no longer just a romantic ruin or quarry for marble, but a text to be read, a puzzle to be solved. I had become both monument and museum, my stones both artifact and exhibit. Through their careful work, parts of my original self returned to me, not just what I looked like, but who I had been. The spectacles were long gone, but now I performed a different role, witness to history, teller of Rome's story. The black shirts marched beneath my arches, their boots echoing against my ancient stones. Mussolini's voice boomed across the piazza as he claimed me as a symbol of fascist glory. They cleared the medieval buildings that had nestled against my walls for centuries, isolating me like a trophy. I stood exposed, scrubbed clean, a prop in their theater of power. My stones remembered other emperors, other parades, and I knew this too would pass. They carved the Via dei Fori Imperiali through the heart of ancient Rome, connecting me to the Forum and Piazza Venezia. Speeches were delivered from temporary platforms erected before me, my weathered face serving as the perfect backdrop for dreams of a new empire. How strange to be reinvented again, from arena of death to fortress to quarry to romantic ruin, and now to political symbol. The black uniformed men came and went, but I remained. War came again. I trembled as bombs fell on the city, though thankfully none struck me directly. The fascists who had used me fell from power. Liberation brought new crowds, soldiers in different uniforms, carrying cameras instead of weapons. Italy rebuilt itself around me, and soon the economic miracle brought waves of visitors from across the world. My identity shifted once more from propaganda piece to something more honest, a survivor, a witness. My body changed with the times. Archaeologists carefully restored my crumbling sections. They created a museum in my upper levels, displaying artifacts from my long history. Lights were installed to illuminate my facade at night, making me a beacon in the darkness. Engineers worked to protect me from the vibrations of modern traffic and the corrosive touch of pollution. I was becoming something new, a carefully preserved relic. The visitors changed too. No longer scholars or aristocrats on the grand tour, but ordinary people from every corner of the world. They arrived in buses and taxis, clutching guidebooks and cameras. They listened to guides explaining my bloody history, took countless photographs, and sometimes simply stood in awe. Occasionally, musicians performed within my walls, their melodies drifting up to where gladiators once awaited their fate. I've survived to find yet another purpose in this modern world. No longer arena, fortress, quarry, or romantic ruin, I've become a complex cultural landmark embodying layers of history. When the moon rises and the tourists depart, I stand in silent contemplation of all I've witnessed. Emperors and popes, gladiators and architects, fascists and filmmakers, all have claimed me, used me, abandoned me. Yet here I remain, waiting for whatever comes next in Rome's eternal story. I am the keeper of 1,000 stories, each whispered into my ancient stones. For nearly 2 millennia, I have collected the narratives of emperors who commanded legions from my heights and gladiators who bled upon my sands. Their tales seep into my foundations like rainwater into soil, creating layers of human experience that mirror the geological strata of Rome itself. The famous battles and spectacles that fill history books represent only my surface memory. Beneath them lie the quieter stories of the stonecutters who shaped my travertine blocks, the slaves who hauled them into place, the architects who solved impossible problems of engineering. Their hands touched me first, their sweat and blood becoming part of my very substance. I hold the passionate devotion of martyrs who died for their faith within my arena, the calculated strategies of generals who studied combat here, the wonder of children attending their first games. I remember the prayers whispered by gladiators before battle and the hushed conversations of lovers meeting in my shadows. No emotion experienced within my walls has truly vanished. My responsibility weighs heavily. I am the last witness to countless lives otherwise forgotten by history. The flower seller who visited daily, the water carrier who quenched the crowd's thirst, the nobleman's daughter who defied convention to attend the games. Their stories live only in my memory now, preserved in the invisible echoes that reverberate through my corridors. For centuries, I privileged the narratives of emperors and senators, allowing the voices of the common people to fade. But modern archaeologists now uncover artifacts that speak of different experiences. A child's lost toy, a woman's hairpin, graffiti scratched by a spectator. These fragments help restore balance to my collected memories, honoring lives once deemed unworthy of record. Few structures can claim such continuous presence in the human story. I have witnessed Rome's glory, fall, and transformation, from pagan celebrations to Christian ceremonies, from medieval fortress to Renaissance quarry, from romantic ruin to modern icon. Each visitor today adds their own chapter to my collection, their whispers joining the endless conversation between past and present that echoes within me. I've become a living laboratory for your modern scientists. Archaeologists examine my foundations, measuring each stone, analyzing the patterns of my construction. Historians pore over my surfaces, finding clues in weathered inscriptions. Engineers marvel at how I've withstood millennia of earthquakes and storms. Each probe, each scan, each careful measurement uncovers another facet of Roman genius that even I had forgotten. My stones speak volumes to those who know how to listen. The mortar binding my stones has fascinated your scientists. Its remarkable durability surpasses many modern concoctions. They've discovered volcanic ash within it, pozzolanic material that creates a chemical reaction, strengthening over centuries rather than weakening. My architects knew secrets lost until recently. When your researchers extract core samples from my walls, I feel a momentary pinch, but pride follows as they exclaim over the perfect proportions, the mathematical precision in my design. Your acoustic engineers have tested my spaces, finding that my design created perfect sound projection for the Emperor's pronouncements. Computer models recreate my original appearance. The vibrant painted surfaces, the awning system that shaded spectators, the complex machinery beneath my arena floor. These revelations delight me. Parts of myself I couldn't perceive are now understood through your technological eyes, honoring the brilliance of those who conceived me. My crowd management systems particularly impress your modern experts. The ingenious network of entrances, stairways, and corridors allowed 50,000 spectators to enter and exit swiftly and safely. Your stadium architects still study these principles. The numbering system on my seating guided ancient Romans to their proper places, a sophisticated solution that predated your modern ticketing by millennia. I was not merely built, I was engineered as a complete system. Preserving me presents constant challenges. Your scientists battle the effects of pollution that eats at my stone, vibrations from modern traffic that shake my foundations, and the weathering from rain and wind. They've developed special mortars matching my original composition, cleaning techniques that remove grime without harming my surface. Each conservation project balances allowing visitors to experience me while protecting my aging body from their touch. I've become a teacher of history, written in stone. Each excavation beneath my foundations reveals another layer of Rome's story. Artifacts from daily life, evidence of architectural adaptations, signs of fires and repairs that marked dramatic moments in my long existence. Even after centuries of examination, I still surrender new secrets. This gives me profound satisfaction to serve not just as monument, but as manuscript, my very substance, a text from which future generations will continue to learn. My stone walls may stand in Rome, but my image travels the world. In postcards, films, and history books, my distinctive oval shape has become a universal symbol. Strange to think that people who have never walked my corridors instantly recognize my silhouette. My curved arches and imposing facade have transcended mere architecture to become something greater, a visual shorthand for grandeur, antiquity, and Rome itself. I've watched myself replicated across continents. In Las Vegas, a shopping mall bears my likeness. Sports arenas worldwide adopt my name. Colosseums, though few capture my true essence. Film directors use me as shorthand for ancient glory. In Gladiator, I became the backdrop for manufactured drama, my stones digitally restored to pristine condition. How curious to see myself reimagined through modern eyes, my history compressed into a simple visual cue. My feelings about this iconic status are complicated. Pride swells within me that after 2 millennia I remain relevant. Yet frustration simmers when my complex history is flattened into simplistic imagery. My blood-soaked arena becomes a pretty picture on souvenir plates. My engineering marvels reduced to cartoon backdrops. I am both honored and diminished by this global fame, celebrated yet rarely understood in my fullness. I mean different things to different eyes. To Italians, I am patrimonio nazionale, national heritage, a source of pride and identity. To scholars, I am a text to be decoded, my stones revealing ancient engineering genius. To tourists, I am a must-see attraction, a backdrop for photographs. To Romans passing by daily, I am simply part of the urban landscape, extraordinary yet ordinary, like an elderly relative whose remarkable stories have become familiar. Technology has given me new forms of existence. I live simultaneously in stone and in digital space. Virtual tours allow exploration of my corridors from continents away. 3-dimensional reconstructions show me as I once was, complete, painted, alive with spectacle. Each day, thousands of photographs capture my likeness and scatter it across social media, my image traveling at the speed of light to places the Romans never imagined. This global iconic status represents yet another form of afterlife. I exist simultaneously as weathered stone in Rome and as an idea in the collective human imagination. Perhaps this is my greatest achievement, to transcend my physical form and become something more profound, a symbol of human ingenuity, of civilization's grandeur and brutality, of time's passage and the enduring power of architecture to speak across centuries. I have withstood the ravages of nearly 2 millennia. Fire, earthquake, war, each has tried to claim me. The pristine white travertine that once gleamed in the sun now bears the scars of time. Where intricate reliefs and polished marble once adorned my walls, weathered stone remains. Yet I stand. My wounds are not failures, but testaments. Each crack and missing section tells of a threat survived, a century outlasted. The fire of 217 AD licked at my wooden supports, blackening my corridors. I trembled during the earthquakes of 443 and 508, watching stones fall from my upper tiers. The quake of 847 collapsed sections of my southern wall. In 1320, lightning struck, setting ablaze what remained of my wooden interior. Each time, the humans declared me finished. Each time I endured, though increasingly scarred. The worst indignities came from human hands. For centuries, I served as a quarry. My marble and travertine pried loose to build palaces, churches, and homes across Rome. They harvested my bronze clamps, melted my metal fixtures. I became a fortress, then a workshop, then a religious shrine. Each generation reimagined me according to their needs, caring little for what I was meant to be. Even in recent times, danger found me. During the Great War, bombs fell on Rome. The ground shook with explosions that reminded me of those ancient earthquakes. Modern pollution has eaten at my stone more effectively than centuries of rain. Countless feet have worn smooth my steps. Countless hands have touched my walls, each taking microscopic pieces of me away as souvenirs of their visit. Now they seek to preserve what remains. Iron braces reinforce my weakened arches. Gentle cleaning removes centuries of grime without further damaging my stone. Scientists monitor every crack, every shift in my foundation. They limit how many may walk my corridors each day. How strange to be so valued now, when for 1,000 years I was merely a convenient source of building materials. My incompleteness has become my identity. What remains suggests what once was, leaving imagination to complete the picture. I am no longer the perfect oval of Vespasian's vision, yet in my broken state I have achieved something perhaps more meaningful. I have become a symbol of endurance. I stand as proof that even the greatest works of humanity are both impermanent and surprisingly eternal. I stand as both marvel and monster, a contradiction etched in stone. My walls have witnessed the pinnacle of Roman ingenuity, architectural precision that defied the limits of their time, yet also contained humanity's darkest impulses. The same hands that calculated my perfect elliptical form also orchestrated spectacles of death. What does it say about the Roman spirit that such beauty and brutality could coexist so seamlessly? Perhaps I am Rome's most honest creation. My sand absorbed blood while my walls echoed with both screams and cheers. Romans saw no contradiction. Death as entertainment seemed natural, even virtuous. The same citizens who discussed philosophy and created timeless art found community in watching suffering. I hosted the glorious and the grotesque, the triumph of human achievement alongside its moral failure. My very existence questions whether civilization's greatest works can be separated from its greatest sins. How they've seen me has transformed across centuries. Once I was pure triumph, Rome's power made manifest, unquestioned in my grandeur. Then I became ruin, a fallen giant stripped for stone. Later still, a romantic reminder of lost glory. Now visitors approach with complexity in their hearts, admiration for what I represent architecturally, discomfort with the purposes I served. Their changing eyes reflect humanity's evolving conscience. After witnessing nearly 2 millennia of human history, I've developed perspective few structures possess. I've seen empires rise and crumble, moral certainties shift like sand. The Romans who built me believed their values eternal, just as you believe yours today. What entertainments of your era will future generations judge with horror? What achievements do you celebrate that contain hidden cruelties? I've learned that moral evolution never ends. Each visitor who walks my corridors confronts an uncomfortable truth. The civilization that created mathematical wonders, philosophical insights, and architectural marvels also cheered systematic violence. I embody humanity's contradictions. Your modern entertainments, power structures, and blind spots, are they so different? Your societies build technological wonders while ignoring suffering. Your art reaches new heights while inequalities persist. Am I so foreign to your world? My value lies precisely in refusing simple judgment. I am neither pure achievement nor pure atrocity. I am both, inseparably woven together like the very stones that form my walls. I challenge you to see beyond easy categorization, to recognize that human civilization has always contained this tension between creation and destruction, between beauty and pain. Perhaps wisdom begins when we can hold these contradictions in mind without looking away from either truth. I stand silent now, yet I remember everything. The morning light caresses my weathered stones as the first visitors arrive. Their language is a cascade of sounds that echo against my ancient walls. How strange to feel their reverent fingers trace the same paths where emperors once walked. Their cameras flash, brief stars in my long night of centuries, capturing fragments of what I've witnessed since Rome was young. I've watched Rome transform around me. Imperial glory fading into medieval darkness when weeds grew between my stones and shepherds sheltered their flocks in my shadow. I became a quarry, my body dismantled to build palaces and churches. Yet I endured while popes and princes rose and fell, while plagues emptied the streets and wars raged beyond the 7 hills. Within my weathered form, I hold the entire arc of Western civilization. I've felt the thunderous roar of gladiatorial combat, the hushed prayers of early Christians, the calculating measurements of Renaissance architects. I've been battlefield, sanctuary, and canvas. Each generation painting their dreams upon my ancient face, never knowing I absorbed their stories into my very substance. Time moves differently for me. What feels like moments to you, the frantic pace of modern life, the blur of traffic circling my base, are merely breaths in my long existence. I inhabit a strange timelessness, simultaneously anchored in this present moment yet serving as a portal to millennia past. Tourists come and go like summer rain, but I remain, collecting their whispered awe. What have I learned through these countless years? That empires crumble while beauty endures. That human ambition carves itself in stone, yet yields to time's patient chisel. That memory is the most sacred treasure, and I am nothing if not memory made manifest. I've watched civilizations rise from dust and return to it, each leaving traces in my worn surfaces. What future centuries hold, I cannot know. Perhaps new purposes await me, interpretations not yet imagined, but this I promise I will remain. Though I fell into silence long ago, I remember everything, every triumph, every tragedy, every whispered prayer against my stones. I stand as witness to humanity's eternal story. Listen closely. My silence speaks volumes to those patient enough to hear.